I should say it is my privilege to thank Olson Thielen for their sponsorship of our programming. Olson Thielen assists legal firms with tax, audit, and advisory services. They invite you to view their video gallery of business and personal finance topics. More at otcpas.com. That's otcpas.com. We thank Olson Thielen for their support. I have viewed those videos, and they've given us plenty of presentations. Good CLE presenters, actually. So I recommend their video resources. I want to welcome everyone for joining us today. Roy and Jess are our primary co-hosts, so I'm gonna duck out and let them take over. I'll be monitoring chat and Q&A for folks as well. So feel free, as always, to chime in with questions, and I will make sure that we get those forwarded over to our presenters. That goes for the folks who are also joining us on the YouTube live stream. So feel free to chat in either location. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to take over, Jess, if you don't mind, in the beginning. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is Roy Ginsburg. I'm an attorney, coach, and consultant. I've been a practicing lawyer here in Minnesota now for over 35 years. The reason for this morning's program is I'm on a bar committee, Access to Justice, which is basically a committee that looks into ways that we could, promote, pro bono and providing legal services to the disadvantaged. And one of the ideas on the subcommittee that I'm involved in was how do we get the word out? And, that's been a problem of, I think, the entire state and the bar, ever since I've been paying attention to the pro bono community, which is about, 20 years at this point. Then we learned about, this particular program that Mike has put together this spring, business as usual. And so we got together and said, hey, why don't we put together a program? Let's see what's going on. And then, of course, the light bulb goes off. Let's see if we can add elimination of bias credit to it. We'll probably get more attendees. So we put our heads together, and hence this morning's program. And we thought it would be a great idea to hear from different organizations in the state about what they do, and then perhaps even you can even pitch. You have my permission to get volunteers for your particular organizations, and just learn about what's been going on, especially during the pandemic, the challenges that the pro bono communities face, as well as post George Floyd. So, Jess, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, just good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Jess. I don't think maybe Kwame, you and I have met, but I'm not sure any of the rest of us have met. So it's lovely to see you all.
Okay. What I'd like to do is have each of the four of you, first of all, I want to thank you again, introduce yourselves, and even more important, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to the organization, and then explain what your organization does. Because I think there are so many different organizations and alphabets, it's hard to, I actually pay attention to it and I get constantly confused. So I can only imagine if a lawyer in the state who doesn't pay attention, what their knowledge base is. So with that, why don't we go with Veena first?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And thanks so much to the MSBA and to Jess and Roy for having us today. We really appreciate it. My name is Veena Iyer, and I am the Executive Director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. I came to this position, first, and I think most importantly, as the child of two immigrants. My father immigrated to the United States, to Minnesota, in fact, in 1969 in order to go to grad school at the U. He later sponsored my mom a few years later after they got married. Was so upset at that time that it was taking 2 months for her to come here, that he had every citizen that he knew write letters to Senators Mondale and Humphrey to get her here quicker. Of course, now it might take years for her to have come here. But they had me and my brother. We did not actually grow up in Minnesota, but I came back about 12 years ago. And I'm really thankful for it just, being able to have my parents be able to get here and then be born and raised here. And so that part of my story has always stayed with me. It's why I actually started my career in immigration legal services in Chicago, did immigration legal services pro bono work, including with ILCM, while I was in private practice. And so then joined ILCM about 1.5 years ago. So more importantly, ILCM. So ILCM is a statewide organization. We have offices in St. Paul, in Austin, Minnesota, Worthington, Minnesota, and in Moorhead, Minnesota. And we provide direct legal services to immigrants across the state of Minnesota in all types of areas. You also see a little second generation immigrant kind of going back and forth in the background as well. So you can check her out as entertainment.
This is as long as you don't turn into a cat.
Yes, I don't think she will be turning into a cat anytime soon. She's creeping under my desk right now. We provide direct legal services to folks. So that includes things from doing naturalization, which Roy talked about a little earlier. He's done those types of cases with us, to working with folks who are victims of crime to get statuses like the U visa or VAWA. And then we also use due deportation defense. We also do a lot of outreach in the community about immigration. And then finally, we do advocacy. So we're at the state capitol and at the federal level and at local levels advocating for immigrant-friendly policies. We have over 4,000 clients that we usually serve each year, a staff of 30, and over 200 pro bono attorneys who assist us.
Well, before we get to the other introductions, I'm going to put in a plug for ILC. When the lawyers ever ask me that I'm coaching about doing pro bono, which I always strongly encourage my clients to do, I always say, make sure you do some due diligence on the organizations, because some really have their act together and some really don't. The last thing you want to do is go to a place that's not going to give you a lot of support. And I can tell you from personal experience, a few years ago, I did a naturalization pro bono, helping a woman from Somali become a citizen. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And they were great to make it easy. They had training, they had any questions, I always got an answer. So I think they do a great job, and I'm strong. My idea about rationale back then to volunteer was, I don't know anything about all the stuff that they really needed the help in, but to the extent you wanted to free up the volunteers to do more important stuff as opposed to the routine naturalization. So, which I knew, you don't need to be an expert to figure it out. And I let the expert immigration lawyers do the other more important stuff that they needed to do during the Trump administration. But I'll get off my soapbox. Let's have somebody else take the stage and tell us about Jay, Dory, Kwame. Who wants to go next? Speak up. Dory, why don't you go?
No problem. Good morning, everyone. I'd echo Veena's thanks. So thanks to the MSBA, thanks to Roy and Jess for hosting the discussion today. I'm Dory Streit. I'm the Executive Director of Legal Aid Service of Northeastern Minnesota. The acronym is LASNM, and it's not an awesome acronym. It sounds like a side dish to tabbouleh. We know this, but it is what we go by, because Legal Aid Service of Northeastern Minnesota, that's a lot of syllables. So LASNM is one of 6 regional legal service providers for the entire state of Minnesota. And we form the Minnesota Legal Services Coalition. I'll talk a little bit about the coalition. So the coalition programs do general poverty law. So that means we're doing family law, housing law, helping with obtaining and protecting government benefits. We are doing the real scope of direct representation in all poverty law areas. And we have income eligibility guidelines for the individuals that we provide services to. And some of us are funded by the Legal Services Corporation, which is the federal funder that funds many legal aid programs across the entire nation. Just a little bit about the work that the coalition does. So in 2019, we closed about 45,000 cases in Minnesota, providing assistance to 115,000 Minnesotans. It's a lot of staff providing excellent services to low income. I guess I'll just say about myself real quick. I started at a small nonprofit in Duluth called Indian Legal Assistance Program. I was a staff attorney there, so I know what it's like to have that type of caseload, and to really try and focus on how do I feel like an expert in all these different areas of poverty law and do due diligence for my clients. It's stressful, and I think that folks don't entirely recognize and understand the work of a legal aid staff attorney. So I wanted to say that. And I had the privilege of working with the Indigenous communities when I worked at Indian Legal Assistance Program, and at LASNM, we're still providing services to 5 out of the 6 bands of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe that just touch our 11 county region in northeastern Minnesota. So that's who I am. That's who LASNM.
One question I have for you, Dory. I'm always confused which organizations are staffed by, paid lawyers, because I've always understood, and rightly or wrongly, that for the most part, legal aid lawyers are staff lawyers paid, whereas you don't rely on volunteers much, pro bono lawyers. But I also think for some reason that I think that varies by the offices that we have here in the state. So for example, do you have a staff of a roster of pro bono lawyers, or the work that you do is basically paid full-time lawyers that are funded by the state and the feds?
That's a great question, Roy. So the regional programs and most of the targeted programs that are also recipients of state funding, there's about 20 of them. The majority of our staff are paid staff attorneys providing direct legal services to low-income individuals. However, the ratio of staff attorneys at legal aid organizations to eligible individuals in the state of Minnesota is significant. So for every one legal aid attorney, it depends on the income guidelines you look at, but I would say there are 6,000 eligible individuals compared to a private attorney. The ratio is, of the private attorneys in Minnesota, one private attorney for every, I think it's about 350. Jay, I bet you know those stats better than I do. One for every 350 potential paying clients. So you can see that tremendous gap in being able to provide services to all the people who are in need that wouldn't be able to pay for a lawyer. So all of the legal aid programs do rely on pro bono engagement and pro bono involvement. So most of us have our own pro bono programs, and you highlighted the great work at Veena's organization, but most of us have volunteer attorney programs within our organizations. So we have dedicated staff. So at LASNM, we have dedicated staff that coordinate our pro bono efforts. So at LASNM, we're in the northeastern region, we have about 150 active volunteer attorneys that are engaging and providing anything from brief advice to full representation for eligible individuals. And we're so grateful and so thankful that we have a commitment in a rural area of the state. It's really wonderful to see everybody really embracing that ethical obligation to do pro bono work.
Thank you. Let's see, Jay, why don't you talk about Legal Services State Support? And that's a new organization. I was never even aware of it until I volunteered to do this program.
Yeah, thanks, Roy, and thanks for having us again. Yeah, State Support is definitely an organization that's a little bit more in the background in terms of like our name isn't out there as much. But I guess just to start, my name is Jay Singleton. I'm the program manager at State Support. And I came to the legal aid world after spending a couple of years in private practice at Larkin Hoffman. But I had always, I went to law school wanting to work in the nonprofit world, work with legal aid. But I also was really interested in kind of more systems level work and how do we make the system as a whole work better. And so an opportunity came up at State Support, and that's exactly what State Support does. So Dory had mentioned the Minnesota Legal Services Coalition, which is 7 regional legal aid programs. And my office is actually a project officially of the coalition. So we're an office of 7 staff members, and we work to increase coordination amongst those 7 organizations and then the broader legal aid access to justice landscape. And to kind of support those legal aid organizations, nonprofit law firms, and their client communities as well. So we do a lot of work in building partnerships, and then we also do a lot, especially increasingly with technology. So we have 6 websites. So if we get one more, we'll have a website per staff member. So looking forward to that if you have any ideas. And we really do everything from organizing CLEs that are targeted for the pro bono community, for legal aid folks, to providing kind of the infrastructure for allowing clients to apply online to get services, to helping broader pro bono initiatives. And then I think our more public work is helping people learn about their legal rights and helping them connect with legal aid organizations. So our 2 projects that people have, I think, heard the most about are Minnesota Legal Advice Online, which is a website where low-income Minnesotans can go to ask questions about civil legal issues. And then we have a lot of really great volunteer lawyers who are signed up with the website to provide legal advice. So it's kind of like an online virtual clinic before everybody was online and doing virtual clinics. With the benefit that the client and the attorney don't have to be talking to each other at the same time. So we have a secure messaging system where clients can submit their questions and then attorneys can review the questions and provide answers to the clients and then have a back and forth like that.
So there are pro bono opportunities just that, and you can directly sign up with your organization. Is that what that's what I'm hearing?
Yep, I'll send a link through.
Phone lines?
Yeah, so that's our primary pro bono opportunity is with Minnesota Legal Advice Online. Our other website is that a lot of people have heard of is lawhelpmn.org. And that website has lots of free legal information about the types of problems that legal aids clients are most likely to be experiencing, written in plain language. We try to really break it down into here's what you really need to know if you're facing this custody issue or whatever other issue you're having. And then on that website, we also try to make sure that everybody, that people using the website can get connected to the right legal aid organization. Roy, you had mentioned that it's a land of acronyms and lots of organizations. So we try to make sure that we have up-to-date information. We have a tool on the website that helps to get people to the right place based on what their legal issue is and based on eligibility factors like income, where they live, things like that.
I find it funny and interesting that we have all these acronyms, and I admit there's confusion that we need an organization to coordinate the organizations.
Yep.
But that's what we have. Okay. Last but not least, Kwame, why don't you tell us about Legal Corps?
Hi, thanks for having me. So yeah, my name is Kwame, and I'm the staff attorney and program manager for the Entrepreneurs of Color program. And I'm originally from West Africa, Ghana. I came here for college. I went to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. And for an African kid to come straight from Africa to Moorhead, Minnesota was something because the temperatures are kind of different. Anyway, and so after graduating from Concordia, I moved to the Twin Cities and then started a small business where the family owns a hot sauce business. And so I used to distribute the products here. And then after that, I went to law school and then moved back to the Twin Cities and opened a small firm doing debt collection, defense, and bankruptcy. And that was when I found out about Legal Corp. And it was really cool because I thought Legal Corp was an organization that I could have used when I still had my small business. And so I applied and got this position with Legal Corp. Now, for those of you that don't know, Legal Corp provides free, non-litigation business legal advice to entrepreneurs. So we would help business owners with contracts, agreements, entity formation, things like that. We don't do anything associated with litigation. And we assist entrepreneurs, we assist inventors, and then we also assist nonprofits. So we'll provide, assistance with getting your 503(c) paperwork together and things like that. So those are the three main kinds of clients that we do assist. What else were we supposed to talk about?
Well, yeah, I guess that's about it. Basically, your introduction and what else you do and what the organization does. I'm just going to take it aside to tell a side story about Legal Corp. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been dabbling in and out of the pro bono world, doing a little here, doing a little there. And actually back in the early 2000s, I was actually fortunate enough to be on the task force that formed Legal Corp. That got the idea, and then of course it became the organization that it is today. I think when did it start? 2004, 2003, Kwame, something like that. It's been around for 15 years. And I tell this story to demonstrate how one person can make a difference as far as what legal services could be provided to the disadvantaged. A guy named Jim Bailey, he's a bankruptcy guy he's a senior partner over at Frederickson. He's always been active in this MSBA. He was president, I want to say about 15, 20 years ago. And he had this idea. He was always passionate about pro bono as well, in general. And he always had this idea at this point about 20 years ago that, there's so many pro bono opportunities, but most of them are in the litigation area. What about all these business type lawyers? They really want to help the disadvantaged. But Jim also recognized that there was a need for services, with a lot of minority owned businesses and businesses owned by the disadvantaged. So he saw that link. And this was this is now in many ways conventional pro bono, that a lot of states or organizations are out there. But 20 years ago, we were a leader, our state. And what I took away from this experience, because I was basically on the sidelines just watching, I would show up to the meetings and say, this is interesting. But what one person really, he had this idea. And I guess since he was very active in the MSBA, he was able to, do what was needed. And I've always maintained that when in bar associations, when you have leadership roles, people pretty much let you do what you want to do as long as it's not crazy. Everyone else is more than happy to let you go, do what you want to do. And his idea certainly was not crazy. It was a great idea. But because of that one person, we have an organization now that has 4 or 5 staff members and, hundreds, if not thousands of, businesses being helped where it was just a dream. 17, 18 years ago. It's amazing because I really haven't been involved much at all in the last 10, 12 years. I just was on the board. But that, again, I share that story because really one person, you always hear one person can't make a difference. That's BS. One person can make a huge difference in this area, not to mention the difference that Legal Corp does for the clients that it serves. Jess, do you have any questions you would like to ask before we get, or you want to take the lead on getting to the subject matter of, the impact of the pandemic and George Floyd?
Sure. Yeah, I'm realizing that I'm definitely the weirdo on in this group because I'm very much oh, I don't think pro bono is the answer because the math doesn't work out. So I'm super curious what everybody's organizations are doing. Jay, your organization has the websites with all the information and stuff. I'm really into scale and how do we provide more access besides direct representation, because as a lawyer that graduated in 2007 and is, I have crushing student loan debt and a pretty low income. It's just this is not realistic for a lot of us to dedicate very much time to pro bono in lieu of getting money to pay down debts and bills and all that stuff. So I'm super interested in that. I want to make sure we talk about that. But the pandemic has definitely presented some unique issues, and I'm curious what y'all are seeing with how the pandemic has disproportionately affected people in the sort of like A to J hot zone, right? Like I'm picturing, yeah, oh, great, we have court online, except unless you are in a rural area and you don't have good internet service, or you are living in poverty and don't just happen to have a webcam and a computer and how are you seeing the impacts of the pandemic disproportionately affecting sort of the clientele and people of color specifically?
You have to call on people, Jess.
Come on now. This is supposed to be a conversation. You were all warned. This is not a panel.
I can jump in. Jess, you hit the nail on the head when you started talking about technology. So as everybody knows, our way of remaining safe during the public health emergency has been moving to a virtual environment. And for communities that are disproportionately represented in our poverty population, those same communities are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So what already was a significant bridge or barrier for access to justice became even larger with this digital divide. I remember a story from one of our staff explaining that a client was trying so hard to get a staff attorney their documents to review so they could engage, because we're engaging with their clients in a virtual way too. And the internet was so unreliable, and all they had was their smartphone. And they were seriously going around their small rural town trying to find enough bandwidth to be able to send page by page, like picture by picture, this long document that the attorney needed to review with them. I mean,
right. And that's putting pressure on the lawyer to make somebody understand how to coach that client through using their smartphone to do this, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, and there's a lot of cat lawyers out there. I mean, we don't all know how to scan documents with our smartphone. I mean, that's why that was so funny, right? Because it's like, oh, we've all been cat lawyer.
Yeah,
like, I don't know
it's all about cat lawyers. That's just it for now on. Cat
Yeah.
lawyer. I love it, Jess. Luckily, we have people who might have previously even been cat lawyers become no longer cat lawyers, because they know it's so important and so critical for us to be able to represent our clients. So, and I think it's important to remember, while trying to figure out all this technology, clients are in crisis. Like they're not proactively calling us. They're calling us because their world is collapsing. Something horrible is happening to them. And so it's enough to make somebody just quit and just give up when they're relying on their not really functional phone and they're in crisis. So the technology has been a significant challenge, and maybe we'll segue into solutions later. So I'll leave that for later. But I would also say we're seeing an increase in the areas that you would predict that we'd see an increase in. So despite the fact that there's an eviction moratorium, which, by the way, all the legal aid programs are gearing up to get ready for when the moratorium is lifted, however it's lifted, we're still seeing evictions being filed, some of them being, there are some exceptions, right? So trying to figure out ways, or not even specifically evictions, but other ways to get people out of housing. So we're there trying to advocate for them, and an increase in, unfortunately, domestic violence. So we're seeing a lot of that because people, well, you can probably predict why we're seeing more of that given the pandemic. Stress is high, people are home, there isn't a way to escape. It's not an excuse, but it's a reality. And then obviously people are losing their jobs. So it's a serious economic crisis and a mental health crisis for all of our clients. And I want to say too, that the pandemic is disproportionately impacting, like we were talking about, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And I'll say specifically to LASNM, we are seeing that in regards to the Indigenous populations that we are serving. I will try and share this. I don't know if anyone saw the New York Times article that talked about how tribal elders are dying from the pandemic, causing a cultural.
Yes.
Or did you guys see that? Okay.
Right. Because of language preservation. Yep.
Yes. And, you know, the culture and the distrust of the government, of other services, is impacting whether or not they're going to get vaccinated. And it's just so tragic to see across the nation losing this such an integral population of the Native Americans that we're working with. So much is lost. I mean, it's just so tragic. So we are doing what we can. We'll talk about, we're doing what we can to try and help. But I'm going to be quiet now, but that's that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Kwame, do you want to go first?
Okay, so I was just going to say, so for Legal Corp, we saw the challenges differently, and to better understand our challenges, I think it's, I'll tell you a little bit about our service delivery model and how it was disrupted by the COVID crisis and also the civil unrest. So the way we provide services is we have volunteer attorneys. We have over 700 volunteer attorneys that work for all types of law firms, well, mainly business and patent type law firms that assist these clients. And we assist them in 3 ways. The main way we do this is to partner with community economic development organizations. We realize that for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs of color would usually go to these organizations when they need for their business services. And so we partner with them to provide.
Oh, you muted yourself, Kwame.
Sorry. Sorry. So I was talking about some of the partner organizations that we partner with. All of these are economic development organizations like the African Development Center, the Latino Economic Development Center, MNI SOTA Fund, CLUES, LEDC. All of these are organizations that are already trusted in the community that provide business assistance to these clients. And then we go in there and then we provide business legal workshops. So we would have a workshop with them that is just geared towards like entity formation. What kind of entity do you want to choose? Or what kind of agreements do you want to have if you're going to start a home care business? Things like that. We provide customized business legal workshops for these organizations. Then the 2 other types of services we provide is 30 minutes free advice by phone or full representation assistance. That's when you get an attorney to help you draft a contract or whatever. Now, what happened with the pandemic is a lot of these organizations shut down. A lot of them closed their doors. And for a lot of these clients, they are not used to going online to look for this or, going virtual. A lot of them still want to go to the office and directly speak to a person. And so when the government shutdown first happened in February, we couldn't connect with these clients any longer. And so we realized that we had to go into the community. We had to meet them where they were at. So we started doing like tabling events along Lake Street, especially after the civil unrest. We realized a lot of businesses were destroyed on Lake Street. A lot of businesses were destroyed in University Avenue in St. Paul. And so we actually went into those communities and started having clinics in parking lots. So we used to have a clinic in the Mercado Central parking lot. I don't know if you guys know where Mercado Central is on Lake Street. We would have a clinic there Friday mornings and allow some of the business owners to be able to come and talk to us about issues they're having, like so far as like filing insurance claims for the damages that they have sustained. We were able to provide bilingual attorneys that were able to assist them. And then usually once they've been able to talk to someone in that parking lot, so they feel a little bit more comfortable, later on talking to that attorney by phone, working with them to get all the necessary documents to them to get the kind of assistance that they need. Apart from doing that, we advertise on radio. So we advertise both in English on KMOJ and then in Spanish on La Raza to let them know about our services and the fact that they could get them virtually. We also did canvassing events. So we worked with the SBDC in St. Paul, and then we walked along the University Avenue corridor and we would just stop at a business, every business, and just talk to a business owner for like 5 minutes, tell them about the fact that we have these services available. And that was the way of bridging that connection that we had lost, due to the pandemic. So the main challenge that we saw was lack of access to services. Lots of these business owners either are not very conversant being online or cannot afford, like high-speed internet and things like that. And so we, to be able to go around that, we had to meet them where they were at.
Yeah, right on. Veena, you had something.
Yeah, no, thank you so much to both Dory and Kwame. I think I would build on a little bit of what Dory said in particular. I think especially because we're working with individuals on their individual cases, we're seeing a lot of the same issues with that internet access to technology. And one of the things that gets added on, and I think is true of definitely probably Kwame's clients as well, as just that language issue and cultural issue that get exacerbated. So even there are situations where you might have a video that might be able to tell somebody about, oh, how do you get on Teams, or how do you get on whatever program, or use this uploading program? Well, it's in English. And so if somebody doesn't read or write English, that becomes something it's nearly impossible for them to use. So I think that's very, very hard. And I think it's also hard for folks who just didn't have that technological literacy to try to expect folks to try to get that in the midst of a pandemic, and in the midst of a time when you don't have somebody individually be able to sit there with you to learn all of this. I think is near impossible. So I think that has absolutely been really difficult for our clients. I think just echoing what Dory said as well, which is that our clients are going through such a significant crisis that they're contacting us when things are really, really, really awful. So I think in the immigration space, what that means is when people are in deportation proceedings or have been picked up by ICE, when somebody is at kind of the end of, a domestic violence situation and is contacting us because their abuser is threatening to take away their status. And then I think the one silver lining one thing that has been positive for us in the immigration community is that during this time period, especially at the end, is the expansion of DACA. So what's been interesting is that has been one thing that has been happened during the pandemic, which we've seen a surge of interest, a surge of requests in, which is actually positive, providing a step forward. But even for those DACA clients, they're dealing with so many different things for their family members that I think we've only hit the tip of the iceberg on people who have actually contacted us to apply for example, initial DACAs or even their DACA renewals, because they're just dealing with so many different things with their families.
Yeah, I love that you're
Veena,
saying, the tip of the iceberg, because what I'm hearing is like your organizations are kind of like drinking out of the fire hose, and you have all of these people that are in this like critical moment, but behind them are a huge flood of people who are slightly less triage worthy, but still have very valid needs. And we just physically cannot get to all of the people. So that's where I kind of get like down on pro bono as a solution, because it's like, well, what about all these other people too, though, right? Yeah.
Veena, could you, for the uneducated, could you give a very Reader's Digest version of DACA and what the status is now, and then why the need for volunteers now? I noticed in the chat you have a volunteer program coming up for those who are interested in helping DACA folks. Why don't you explain that a little more, because I suspect that at least a handful aren't up to speed on that.
Absolutely. And, you know, the problem of lawyers in whatever discipline is that we start using acronyms without explaining them. So DACA is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. It was originally created by President Obama to create a temporary status to protect individuals who had been brought here as children and who had completed a certain education or military requirements to be able to have both protection from deportation and work authorization. It was in place until 2017. So folks who had come into the country before a certain time could apply for DACA. President Trump attempted to end the program. And during the time that was being challenged in the courts, folks could renew DACA, but individuals who became eligible for DACA under the program, but hadn't gotten a chance to apply before, could not apply for a new or initial DACA. What happened after the Supreme Court found that the decision to end DACA was unlawful. And ultimately, after a couple of different iterations, renewals, of course, continued, but then also USCIS opened up and started accepting applications for new initial DACA applications. So that's kind of a number of people from 2017 to now who had become eligible for the program and are still becoming eligible for the program as they get old enough and as they meet certain requirements. So that's why ILCM, we have long had a program and for the past 3 or 4 years to assist folks with applying to renew DACA every year. And it's a really great, to Jess's point, for those of you who have very little time, 5 to 7 hours a case is our approximation. And we have an initial training coming up, or a renewal training coming up on the 16th. That's information that I posted. In addition, we've just recruited a big group of pro bono attorneys to help with DACA initial applications. Those are a little longer for those people who are applying just for the first time, but I anticipate we'll probably be doing other training so you can sign up to help. And it's a tremendous benefit for the individuals. These are young people, been here for years, and getting that work authorization and that protection from deportation helps so much to support them and their families and help them build their careers and build their lives, and really have the opportunities that they deserve.
Thank you. So Jay, we haven't heard from you in a while. What's the pandemic done to you? In theory, you should be busier. Everyone's going online, but as we've heard, it's not so easy to go online as it is for all of us.
Yeah, well, we have seen a huge increase in traffic, and it really reflects the areas that Kwame, Dory, and Veena have all talked about. Particularly our resources related to housing rights and unemployment have been very, very popular. We, in terms of our office, we transitioned very easily to an online world, and immediately we're like, we've got to get information out there and in as many languages as we can, and try to make sure that it's accessible when somebody's just Googling on their phone. Make sure that our resources are the ones that they're able to find, rather than resources that might not be as accurate or might be charging them for information that they might be able to get for free. So we've created a couple dozen or more fact sheets that we've written about the different issues that people are facing. In April, our traffic to our website tripled, and it was almost all driven by people trying to figure out, what are my rights with housing now that I've lost my job, and then how do I get unemployment? And we saw the impacts, particularly for unemployment and accessing that system online. People who don't speak English had to call in, and there was at one point, a 4-hour window every week when you could call to try to apply for unemployment. So we're trying to, help people navigate those systems that aren't always as friendly, and at least let them know, here are the strictures under which you have to try to access this benefit, and here's additional help if you're not able to do that. And we've seen that throughout the different systems in place. When rental assistance money became available, Folks had to call 211. We have a live chat system on our website. So I once was chatting with someone who was trying to help a family who didn't speak one of the languages supported through the online application. And they had been on hold with 211 for hours over multiple days. So our role has been really to get the information out there, keep it updated, and then just try to help people figure this out. Like Jess, you were talking, all the people beyond the tip of the iceberg who maybe aren't in that final crisis yet, but try to get them information to prevent the crisis from happening, or at least know where to reach out for help if they're at that point. So for us, it's been challenging to stay on top of all of the changes, and then to stay on top of translating those changes over time. You don't think about, you have one housing resource and then it changes, back in March, April, May, at least once a week, sometimes more. And then being like, okay, so we have this change. Now we need to really quickly get it translated into Spanish, Monk, Somali, and then think about what are other ways that we can convey that information. So we've started doing more video content, and then we put that out there and we say, okay, now we need to translate that video content. And then every time the eviction moratorium is extended each 30 days, what are the 20 places we need to go and update that information? Who are the partners we know who have information out? I just found a national site that had an outdated date. So just trying to keep track of getting good information out to people. And then also thinking about how we're reaching people. So Roy, you talked about SEO for lawyers. We're really interested in SEO and making sure that, again, when somebody is Googling a problem, that we're one of the top resources for them. And then we've also expanded out into other channels. So we've really increased the amount that we're posting on social media, which is not something we had focused on before. But we've had some really great support from the Bar Association, actually, to be able to increase our reach on Facebook, because that's where a lot of people go to get information. So we want to meet people where they are as much as we can, and get that information through Facebook.
You mean
I will
real
say that
information that's not fake?
we're trying. It is so hard to get information about housing and unemployment out. Anytime we try to do a paid post on like, here's how you get rental assistance, we are generally, ads that we buy are rejected because you can't post about social issues or boost to those with paid ads. So that's been one of our biggest social media challenges is how do we promote information that people need the most? Because those ads that we buy are always the ones that are the most important for us, are always the ones that are getting rejected by Facebook.
Are you guys using any sort of like messenger chatbots? I know a couple of lawyers that are doing immigration stuff that have been really leveraging Facebook messenger chatbots to help triage, questions to get people directly to the resource they need.
We haven't used any chatbots within Facebook and Messenger, but we are working on a chatbot for law help that will help get people to the right place once the eviction moratoria are lifted.
Nice.
And we're hoping to have law students involved in that project too, so that when that flood comes, law students can be helping to be like an actual person that somebody can talk to and talk through their situation. And just make it a better process in a bad situation.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I know, Kwame, you probably have had this too with the CARES Act and the PPP and EIDL disaster loans. I mean, like I was putting out content for small nonprofits and it would be like, okay, that's now wrong. 2 days later, 4 days later. I mean, it's just like you're continually trying to adapt the information to like Treasury guidance. Oh, well, now the rule is this and now the rule is it, such a struggle to get that information out there. A, timely, but like B, just making it accurate, because it's like if everything is shifting around, it's really, really hard. Yeah.
And it's definitely been a challenge, for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe you're seeing this in the small business community, but like a lot of small nonprofits, they're just not even like applying for the disaster relief because they don't understand, really don't understand it. They don't understand, they've heard it's forgivable, but that seems too good to be true. And they don't understand if they qualify and they assume it's not for them. And so I think there are just some like limiting script problems with some of the COVID relief for certain populations because they just think that they can't, they're not even going to start because they just don't think that they're going to get anywhere, which is interesting.
One question I have for the panelists, I know, Kwame, you talked about the impact of the civil unrest, especially given the clients that you're trying to serve. I'm just wondering if the other three organizations, was there anything any specific impact because of the civil unrest, putting aside the pandemic? Anybody?
There definitely was for us. Some of it was just really basic, which is that we are in the community action building on University Avenue in the neighborhood of St. Paul. So there was significant damage to the building overall. And so going into the building, thankfully, the only thing that happened to our office suite, which is on the second floor, was that a door was broken in. And I will say there was a, that was, in the midst of, I think at that time, there was just such absolute kind of horror and upset among my staff and among obviously our communities about yet another Black man murdered, and just all of the feelings and upset that resulted in. And so, I just kind of immediately pulled together, a Teams meeting, if anybody wanted to drop in, and folks shared what they felt. And I think that was really helpful for staff. But then the next day, our building was broken into. And I will say, as the feeling of, my husband and I live close to the building, and the two of us went to the building to just get things that we wanted to make sure, were safe after we had been broken into, but we didn't know what was going to happen afterward. And then just having this point of saying to my husband, who is a South Asian man, but a brown man, I told him, I'm like, you cannot walk out of the building without me. You cannot walk out of the building without items if you are not with me. And he's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I don't care if it's 10 a.m. You will not walk out as a brown man without me. And it's just not anything that I ever thought that I was going to go through, but was a reality. And so just a coming together of all of that was tremendously difficult. From a client standpoint, I think that what has been really, really hard is it's just exacerbated all of the feelings of, we knew that we had such significant racial injustice in our criminal justice and our immigration systems. And then you add on to that the pandemic. And I think that what we're seeing is just such significant fear from the community. And I can understand, and absolutely understandable fear among our communities, even when they're standing up and taking a stand. So, people calling us to say, okay, wait a minute, if I'm undocumented and I'm, protesting against police brutality, which I should be able to do, what would happen if I get picked up, and, advising on those types of issues. So it was a really difficult time, but I think it was not about anything new. Our work has always been about working toward racial justice. When you think about the fact that 97% of our clients are people of color, that when you look at Minnesota, when you look at the Black population in Minnesota, it's a significantly higher immigrant population than the rest of the country. And Somali Americans are at the highest rate, have the highest rate of deportation in the country, which of course impacts our nation. When you look at the fact that the Asian American community here is so diverse, and that two of the groups that have the highest poverty rates, Burmese and Hmong immigrants, have such a high population here and are in need of such significant services. And of course, the Latino community that is supporting so many essential services, there's no way in which working for racial justice is not embedded in working for immigrant justice.
Yeah.
Dory, how about the impact outstate of civil unrest? Was there much of an impact? I think most people would think probably not, but I'm not going to be surprised to hear that there was, and I'm curious to know what it was.
I think that is displayed in different ways, depending on your geographic location. And so perhaps the way it was felt by our communities and those individuals that are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, there's a tendency to retreat. There's a tendency to isolate. There, just like Veena said, it's all based in fear. And so we I know that when you frame this discussion, Roy, you talked about separating it from the pandemic, but it's like, there's something about this horrible tragedy and what it represents and what's happening in our world with the pandemic that you just can't separate, because really one of the root causes of why these communities are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic is because of situations like the murder of George Floyd. So you can't, like, it's all one. So, but yes, we're seeing it reflected, just like Veena said. I echo really what Veena said. And I can share just from talking to my colleagues in the metro area that they also, those organizations, and I'm sure Jay can speak to this too, experienced a lot of unrest for and unease for their clients and for their staff members. And so I'm glad that there's been a significant movement towards really focusing on equity and diversity and racial justice. But I will say it's been present within legal services programs because this is generally our primary population of individuals that we're serving.
Thank you.
I do want to say, because I know we're short on time, I would be remiss to not tell you about the solutions that
okay. You got about a minute or two.
Yeah. So I shared with Mike a website for people to take a look at. So it's legalkiosk.org. Civil legal services, we're so fortunate to receive $3.2 million in CARES Act funding. And so we used it for technology. This is how we decided to address that technological divide, that digital divide. And so we have, in this really short period of time, I just have to, it still blows my mind. November to December, we managed to partner with community partners all across the state to deploy legal kiosks, so computer workstations for people to come and use so that they can receive civil legal services. So you'll find legal kiosks anywhere from, working with domestic violence community service programs to malls in rural Minnesota, to city halls, to law libraries. They're all over. So if you look, you can learn a lot about this movement. And so they've been deployed and they are going to be ready for people to use here very soon. And so that's been a great solution. And I just want to say to Jess's point that about pro bono, I think it was the Chief Justice that said at a MSBA event that we're not going to pro bono our way out of this. And that was her segue to the paraprofessional project, which I starts March 1st. I will give props to Tiffany Doherty Schooler, who is LASNM's Director of Advocacy, that's been part of the planning and steering committee representing legal aid for that project. So I do think that is an incredible solution for the state of Minnesota. But I also want to say, Jess, you're right. Pro bono is a critical leg of the stool of how we provide civil justice to low-income individuals. Pro bono work is amazing, but it's not going to address that entire gap.
Right.
And I was at a LSC conference last year before Jim Sandman, maybe some of you know Jim Sandman, before he was retiring. And he got up there and said that. He said, we're not going to pro bono our way out of this. He said the real solution is changing the justice system. It's designed for lawyers. It's not designed for people. It's not designed for the layperson to be able to go and do something and receive justice. You can't navigate the justice system right now, unless you have an advocate or a lawyer to tell you how to do it, unless you have an awesome website like Law Help MN to try and get you there to know how to do it. So it really does come from a bigger change. So Jess, you're right. But I also want to say we really do value pro bono. But let's see what we can do to make change in our justice system.
I'm picturing like justice ATMs, these kiosks, like with like a scale on them, like some sort of like.
There's pictures on the website.
Yeah.
So make sure you take a look. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I don't know if Dory mentioned the number, but it was over 250 legal kiosks that were deployed in under 2 months, which when you think about supply chain issues even was just a giant project.
Right. Well, and it's something that scales, right? Because we have to start getting behind things that scale, because pro bono, as critical and important as it is, it just doesn't scale to the problem. So I love that. That's so great. Thank you all for being here today. I think we're out of time.
Thanks for having us.
We are at a
Thanks for
time.
having us.
I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you, Jess. Mike, is there anything you want to add before we sign off?
Well, thank you, everyone. That was awesome. Thank you so much. I do need to recite the CLE code. I threw it into chat for folks who may be just chiming in by the phone. It's 343-454. That's 343-454. Thanks to you all. Thanks to all of you for joining us. We will see you next in March. The first Thursday in March is when we're on next for business as usual. So have a great rest of your day, everyone.